Hello and welcome to this Energy Institute webinar, Case Studies on the COVID-19 Response. We have attendees from around the world, so good morning, good afternoon and good evening as well. My name is Will Sadler. I'm the Head of International Operations at the Energy Institute. And this webinar acts as the launch of the Hse and Sustainability Week event to 2021, which is organised by us, the Energy Institute, hosted by BAPCO, and endorsed by the Bahrain National Oil and Gas Authority and the Sustainable Energy Authority Bahrain. So I want to thank BAPCO, NOGA, the SEA, our sponsors IBM and Iconics, our regional associate partner, our sponsor Linkson, our regional associate partner Iconics, and all of our supporters for making the event happen. So firstly, to address the obvious, we're not doing this in person in Bahrain as we've intended. That's a shame, but the good news is that we've used the opportunity to put together a great program of online activities that will run starting now and throughout 2021 in the lead up to the face-to-face event in Bahrain next December. That will include some interviews with key regional figures, technical webinars and young professional events. So I'd like to encourage everyone to start with, keep yourself engaged and involved as we progress with that program. So a couple of housekeeping notes before we start. If you'd like to ask any questions, please click on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen, select all panelists from the drop-down and type in your question. Please could you remember to state who the question is aimed at, and please don't post anything in the chat apart from the questions to the speakers. And we'll try to include as many questions as we can into the panel discussion. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction to the Hse and Sustainability Week. So the week includes two conferences along with roundtables, networking and side events. It draws an international audience and speakers, and 2021 will be the third iteration of the event and the first time that we've run it out of the UAE. So we're growing. Part of the value of joining an Energy Institute event is that the audience can engage with our interdisciplinary and international network. So you get a broader outlook than you might do from a single discipline event. We're also able to access our leading edge international expertise from our 100+ technical good practice committees, and we provide opportunities to engage in two-way dialogue about the key issues that you're facing. The event's open also to young professionals as well as established, and one of our main aims for the event in 2021 is to use this program to engage with the next generation. So I'd encourage anyone that has younger professionals working at your organization to keep them informed as well. So why HSE and sustainability? We brought together these two conferences because the topics of HSE and sustainability are becoming ever more interrelated. So not only because HSE issues are vital to rapid utilization of low carbon technologies, but in highly competitive environments and in a world where which is under major climate threat, decarbonisation is becoming a critical part of the risk profile of any organisation. So it's organisations that manage that climate risk effectively that are fundamentally more competitive as they bid for projects and they try to access finance. And in 2020, of course, we're operating in the context of the impact of COVID-19. And looking at HSE, physical distancing, remote working, operating in uncertainty has become the new way of working. And at the same time, organizations need to keep innovating and learning to take advantage of rapidly evolving digital tools and technologies, AI, data, which quickly are allowing organizations to operate under more constrained circumstances, but also improving efficiency into the future. So the event will focus on resilience, tackling that with three key themes. Respond, to share immediate actions post-COVID. Rebuild, to help businesses adapt their plans and systems. And reimagine, to embrace innovation. So today we're addressing the response to COVID-19. We brought together a number of case studies from a great set of speakers to highlight and discuss how organisations are dealing with the HSE implications and finding urgent solutions to an evolving crisis. After that, we'll have a 20-minute Q&A, and we're planning to finish at 10:30. I won't introduce the speakers now because Sophie's will do that. So just quickly to introduce the Energy Institute for those of you who don't know us. We're the Chartered Professional Institute for anyone working in energy. We're cross-sectoral and interdisciplinary, so our membership spans the world of energy, from renewables through to oil and gas, from engineers through to lawyers, and it's this breadth of scope that's our USP. We have roughly 20,000 individual members globally in around 200 companies, and we're independent, so we don't act as a lobby group. We act as an independent facilitator for evidence-based collaboration, an honest platform linking industry, academia, and policymakers. Our ambition is that energy is better understood, better managed, and better valued globally, and we really do that in three main ways. The first is sharing knowledge through events like this one, and a vast events program, including IP Week, which is our signature event, which is coming up in February. I'd encourage anyone to take a look at that. We also have a vast online knowledge resource for our members and monthly magazines to keep our members informed. Secondly, developing skills through professional qualifications and titles and delivering industry training. And thirdly, through good practice. So we develop good practice guidance for industry by helping our member companies collaborate together. That includes around 750 different titles developed by about 100 different technical committees. Some of our larger member companies in the Middle East include Saudi Aramco, ADNOC, and Kuwait Petroleum. Otherwise, in the Middle East, we have an active hub of members out there. So about 1,500 members in the region, and we're growing every year. We run an annual program of events, and we collaborate with some of the key regional organizations. We've just set up last year a young professionals network who've run a really active, engaging, and informative program of events this year. So please do get in touch if you want to get involved for either our branch or young professionals network in the region. So really, this slide is just to give us a bit of an idea of the scope of the guidance that we produced, which we draw on for the HSE and Sustainability conferences. So we produce a lot of guidance which is industry leading, related to process safety and human factors, including a number of different industry sectors. It's possible to engage with our Good Practice program by becoming a partner, so get in touch if you'd like to learn more about that. Just to give a couple of examples of work that we're doing at the moment. Our health committee is producing guidance on managing mental health, including specifically looking at mental health post-COVID-19. That's one of a few addendums of different pieces of guidance that we've been developing since COVID-19. Our Blue Book is the Bible for anyone involved in design, maintenance, and decommissioning of filling stations. We've already developed a hydrogen addition to this, as well as one for CNG and LNG installations. And next year, we'll be bringing out another edition, which is about co-locating electric charging points at filling stations. One more example, we've produced Toolbox, which is a free-to-use web app, which provides a collection of incident lessons and safety information shared by global energy companies. So that's designed for frontline workers or supervisors to use at work every day, helping the team to get home safe. It's free to access. I'll drop a link into the chat so people can get access to that. We also help build capacity by providing training in all of these areas, and that's often led by the authors of the EI guidance, who will be leading global experts. And increasingly, we work in low carbon areas. Now, of course, a lot of the work that I've listed under HSE will also support sustainability. A lot of the guidance that I've listed here focuses on safety in low carbon areas, but just a couple of examples here. We have a project funded for 2021 to draft briefing notes for the solar PV installations. And this work actually was instigated at HSE and Sustainability Week last year, when it was noted that there was a lack of consensus technical guidance for solar PV systems. We also form the Secretariat for G+, the Global Wind Health and Safety Organization, and Safety On, which focuses on onshore wind health and safety. And we're running a number of projects in areas like CCUS, hydrogen, battery storage, and the circular economy. So hopefully that gives a little insight into what we do and why we're running the event. So with that, I'd like to welcome you again, and I'll introduce our moderator for our fireside chats, Hafiz Al-Kassab. So Hafiz has over 26 years of experience in the downstream oil and gas. He's a chemical engineer by trade, and he's a fellow of IChemE. He's a chartered engineer and a member of the Institute of Leadership and Management, and he's been decorated with the Order of Bahrain, third class for services to the Kingdom of Bahrain. He currently works as a project director for the BAPCO modernization program and is leading on the integrated project management team for the major multi-billion-dollar expansion and upgrade of the existing BAPCO refinery. Over to you, Hafiz.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Will, for the introduction. I'd just like to welcome everyone again to this webinar. And as Will mentioned, we're here today to really talk about COVID-19, the impact it's faced on us in the industry, and more importantly, what we're doing about it. It's an opportunity for you in the audience to tap the knowledge and experience of our panelists today, who come from a range of areas within the industry, from operators to regulators to support consultants. And we hope we're going to be able to provide you with some interesting information, knowledge about what we're doing about COVID-19. Clearly, at the start of the year, we never envisaged we'd have this amount of impact. And when we're looking at sustainability and business resilience, we are changing the way we've done business. So we really need to figure out what we've done and how we can learn from each other moving forward. The impacts on personal and process safety are paramount to ensuring a sustainable business going forward. The people issues are also very high on the agenda. Well-being, mental health, stress management. These are all issues that all of us are facing as we move forward. So the format for today is really around giving you the opportunity to ask the questions that you would like answered. And our job is to try and figure out how we can do that. What we're going to be doing is in a few moments, I'll introduce our panelists, and each of them will give a three-minute introduction about key points that they would like to address. And then we will go into a question and answer session. We're going to try and make this as interactive as possible. And so we have a mechanism through Menticom to enable you to participate in audience polls and also in generating some word clouds. So if I could encourage you all now to scan the QR code that's on your screen. If you can just quickly, and I will do the same, and we can walk through it. Just scan the code, and it will take you to a link. If you proceed, open that link, you should come up with Mentimeter. And if we just move forward to the question, we've got a practice question here. Excellent. People are already pressing the buttons. So if we could just answer that question, has COVID impacted your ability to manage HSE governance in the workplace? And your answer, and we will try and see if we can get some responses here. And as you can see, what's happening is as people vote, we're getting the answers, and the majority so far are saying that yes, it has impacted our ability. And I think that's one of the topics we'll be talking about over the course of the next 90 minutes or so, is what we're doing about this, because we recognize that there is an impact. Our speakers today hopefully will be able to enlighten us on what they've done differently to ensure that the HSE management systems and practices are audited, and we ensure they're effective. Okay, so that's the practice round. I hope everyone's been able to figure that out. And now what we'd like to do is do a word cloud generation. So the question is, during COVID-19 pandemic, what has your organization found to be its top 3 HSE challenges? On your Mentimeter screen, you'll see 3 boxes. If you could just enter what you think are the 3 words. And maybe as people start doing this, you'll start to see some words that you recognize, and you can submit the same word, and the word cloud should be generated. So during COVID, what has been your organization to be the top 3 HSE challenges? Somebody needs to submit so we can get going. And as you can see, the words are coming on the screen, and the more similar words that are mentioned, they will become larger font, they'll become more highlighted. You can see various words coming up. At the moment, communication is higher, a bit more bold. We've got 2 communications in there, and a variety of issues that we're faced with around personal safety, personal hygiene, auditing. We've got mental health. And so these are quite powerful tools, because we can use these in debating, discussing what we can do about it. And collaboration, communication seems to be coming through, and we'll take that on board as we move forward. So I hope everyone's up to speed on the polls. Just to remind everyone that as we get into the discussions, we have the chat box. Please put your questions there, and we will try and get through as many of them as we can. What I'll do now is I will just introduce our panelists who are joining us today, and then we will give them the opportunity to make some introductions. So our first panelist is Dr. Samantha Horseman, who is the Innovation Ecosystem Lead in Saudi Aramco Entrepreneurship Center. Samantha's been involved in HSE, innovation, and human performance industry for well over 20 years now. Currently, she leads the new Innovation Ecosystem Vertical at WAED, which is the Saudi Aramco Entrepreneurship Center. She walks the talk of innovation and HSE through her impressive patent and prototype portfolio established at the E-Factory, which is focused on human-machine interfacing, with 60 granted globally and a collective of 35 regional and global awards over the years. Samantha sits on several boards and was the company representative for the World Economic Forum Incubator, which is Workplace Alliance Global Study, and now leads the Market Accelerator as the MENA President for the Institute for Health and Productivity Management. Furthermore, she is the president of the Innovation Ecosystem Society and director of the Google for Entrepreneurs, the Grind chapter for the HAM. So thank you, Samantha. Our second panelist is Chinzia Sangali, who's the Hsc Manager at ENI in Abu Dhabi. Chinzia has more than 25 years of experience in the oil and gas industry. gained through direct engagement in several onshore and offshore projects all around the world, covering all the aspects related to HSE, including Hsc management system setup and implementation, maintaining HSE practices as an integral part of project philosophy, management of project execution for HSE requirements and monitoring, ensuring minimal environmental impact. During her career, she's been assigned to affiliates in the UK, Iraq, Egypt, and Abu Dhabi, bringing a worldwide experience, and she's also had the chance to directly follow operational aspects of HSE. Our third panelist today is Paul Bradley, who is Head of Operations for the Energy Division of the UK's Health and Safety Executive. Paul has 28 years of experience as a mechanical engineer in the UK, underground coal mining industry, holding 9 senior management positions. He joined the HSE executive in 2008 as a principal inspector of mechanical engineering in the hazardous industry sector. For everyone's information, the HSE executive is UK's independent regulator, so he'll be bringing that insight into our discussions today. He's currently HSE's Head of Operations in the Energy Division and part of its senior leadership team, with overall responsibility for mines, quarries, offshore, onshore, well and drilling engineering operations and diving operations. Welcome to our 3 panelists. The plan now is to give them an opportunity to make some opening remarks, and we'll start with Dr. Samantha Horstman. So Samantha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hafid. We have come across key HSE lessons with the global pandemic. And these 3 lessons include our behaviors, our best infection prevention tool, our health, it's our commodity, being health helps fight disease. Innovation and technology has been critical to advance HSE, being flexible and agile and being able to pivot. So we have been able to create those 3 key lessons learned into a case study here at the eFactory. And the technology that we've actually developed and the prototype that we're testing is called COVID19 nudge, or C19 nudge. It combines nudge theory, biofeedback loops using advanced learning sensory alerts and haptics, in addition to advancing human-machine interfaces. So that's basically the human and a technology. So like you and your phone or any other devices that you use. So what is a nudge? A nudge is a cue or a prompt that elicits a reaction. For example, this morning you came to your work and we already see COVID-19 nudges around us. There are temperature checks at the door, everyone's wearing masks, there's physical distancing stickers on the floor, there's hand sanitizers everywhere we look, and there's cleaning protocols, and we also see different layouts in our offices, as you can see behind me. Also, our apps, we're getting prompts about, again, hand washing and making sure that we don't shake hands and we avoid touching our faces. And when we sneeze or cough, we sneeze or cough into an elbow. But these nudges only happen through repetition. So that's what we've developed. We've developed C19 Nudge as a deep tech solution. So it consists of an app, a wearable device, and a docking station, as you could see in the media clip we just shared with you. And there's 3 key elements to COVID-19. Number 1, it protects. So it actually calculates how many times you touch your face in a day or an hour. For example, our research is showing that we touch our faces 23 times in an hour. And that's critical because that is how the virus enters into our system. Prediction, we're able to collate data streams in relation to health risk, in relation to high, medium, and low profiles, looking at temperature, looking at heart rates, and looking at stress levels. Alert is the last third element, which looks at, again, app notifications, but also a device that gives you more of a haptics approach when you your behaviors or your practices need a little bit of a nudge, and that includes vibration and also audio signals. So in summary, the vaccine is going to be available globally, but our best infection prevention tool are our behaviors. And we need to leverage technology and innovation, as mentioned previously already. We need to adhere to health and safety practices and protocols at work, at home. And we've already seen industry good practice. NASA, for example, also has a wearable that you can actually download in 3D print. We're seeing these advancements, which is really a call to action to HSE. Now is our time. Thank you very much and look forward to questions later on. Over to you, Hafid.
Thank you, Samantha. Some very interesting insights there. Next up will be Hse Sangali. We welcome her to say her 3 minutes.
Thank you for sharing all this experience. And I would like to share with you some thoughts that I had in mind in this historical moment. And I noted that there's a desire, a need to strengthen the communication, even though the social distance is recommended. So we change the involvement of the people, the family involvement change. There are a new way to be together, a new setup for the house, and also tool change with a massive introduction of virtual tour, virtual practice, training online, webinar. So there's a new way to be close. Just to share with you what's happened in ENI. Of course, ENI is the headquarters is based in Italy. So as Italian, the coffee breaks were very important, and usually it was a moment for people to share ideas, news, info, also moment for confiding and let off sometimes steam with someone and much more. So we realized that we need these moments, and the company create in our website, the company's intranet, an institutional space named We've Never Stopped Stories. These stories are not only to share work success, but also how people reach them. And it's not only professional stories, it's sometimes very personal. And you can find photo, video, interview of colleagues at work, but also at home, because our workspace sometimes is our homes. In houses, you can see our colleagues in kitchen, in living room, and sometimes also in bedrooms. So also the people around our colleagues are different, because now we have families at home. So we can see sons, daughters, and we can realize that our colleagues are also sometimes father, and also sometimes grandfather and grandmothers. And the people around our colleagues are curious to understand the oil process and to see what's happened. So in a certain way, our horizons have widened, and why not? We can also take in consideration the suggestion idea from our families, and sometimes they help solving problems. The big question is how we will take in consideration all this experience, and how it will be our new normal, how the family involvement to be continued, or what kind of skills we acquired during this period of lockdown. I found that it was very useful to consider the new technology, and also I saw in the clouds words that one challenge was on-site visits. It's true, but I think that to implement the virtual on-site visit, it's quite a benefit because people are more involved, and you can extend the involvement of the visit on site also to people that so far they were not able to join the real tours. These are my thoughts that I would like to share with you, and I'm available for other questions. Thank you.
Cynthia, thank you very much for sharing those remarks, and it was good to see how you linked it through to the word cloud that we had at the beginning, and communication is clearly key. Next up is Paul Bradley. Appreciate if you could share with us your opening remarks, Paul.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, the Energy Institute, for the opportunity to participate in this event and to speak to everyone, and welcome. Yeah, a strategic approach to this crisis. Cast your minds back in the UK, at least to March 23rd. That was kind of the beginning of the lockdown for the UK. A week prior to that, all work activities were called into question. Were they essential work activities? Did they really need to take place? We need to look after the general public, but also maintain the energy security of supply. So really, really challenging times at that point in time. The Health and Safety Executive took a 2-week hiatus in terms of how we were dealing with operations. We went from the immediate regulatory aspects of it more into the consultative, collaborative approach, and gathering intelligence of what we needed to do and what operators were doing to enable the security of the energy supply to be maintained. We helped trade associations and operators to write guidance that would enable work activities to continue. Again, this really collaborative approach was welcomed on a tripartite front. The operators, the regulators, and also the employees and trades unions and trade associations. We helped in the formations of risk assessments. We did our own risk assessments. We looked at how we were going to interact with duty holders, all the challenges of social distancing, all the aspects of what PPE might be required and how we could deal with the shortages of it, and then how we would go on to regulate the industries, the energy sectors. Regulating was very, very challenging, as you can imagine. Maintaining social distancing was the key aspect of our work activities, and in some circumstances the work activities had to be very, very carefully rationalised to make sure that they could be undertaken. It's not always been possible to do that. We've had to bring into the fore the use of face coverings. We've had to bring in specialised PPE. We've had to look at how the work activities have been undertaken and change the way that we do things significantly. But we've evolved as time's gone on. We've very much in the offshore world used testing as a tool. In the early parts of the pandemic, the testing regime was very, very challenging in the UK, and no doubt throughout the rest of the world as well. Tests weren't freely available, and they had to be put in place for the really vital frontline staff within our hospitals and care homes, etc. So implementing testing was done more as a business security rather than public health security. Private testing was brought in, and even now in this latter part of the pandemic, before we move into the vaccination stage, testing is still only about 70% in use. We've had to use other methodologies to ensure that people are asymptomatic, not showing the signs of COVID. We've undertaken temperature testing and other aspects along those lines, questionnaires, scrutiny, self-isolation. It has been quite a challenge. As we've moved through that phase, we've moved into the regulatory aspects of it. We set up a team of callers that called up different businesses, took them through a questionnaire around their COVID security to enable them to continue their workforce. Followed that up with inspectors who had lots of experience in occupational health. And then finally, if they didn't pass those kind of two benchmarks, we did send out seasoned inspectors to actually inspect the premises on a case-by-case basis. And that showed us some really innovative technology. We've seen temperature checks that are remote, as you would see through the likes of FLIR cameras or other types of screening temperature checks. We've seen facial recognition used for lots of different activities to avoid the need to touch surfaces. We've seen deep cleansers between offshore activities where people live offshore for three weeks at a time, and the arrangements that have had to be put in place to enable cabin sharing on opposite shifts and deep cleansers in between them. So we have come almost full circle in terms of the pandemic. We've got the security of supply. We've got some really good examples of where operators have adapted and collaborated to take us to a much better place and maintain the UK's security. Thank you, Hse.
Thank you, Paul, for sharing those remarks, and we'll explore them in a few more details over the coming minutes. I invite all our panelists to switch on their videos and join as a group. And I also invite the attendees to share some questions. The box on the right is looking a little blank for me at the moment. I'll give you a few more moments to raise the questions that you want answered. What we're going to do now is we're going to seek your input on a couple of additional questions around polls, which will come up now. Using your Mentimeter again, please can you answer the questions? First one up is, how has COVID-19 pandemic affected HSE practices at work? Do you believe that the impact has been that it's increased your efficiency, it's decreased your efficiency, or you found a workaround? And we can see here that so far it appears that the majority have found different ways to work. So there has been an impact, and different solutions have been found to manage HSE. And we're talking about the personal and process safety in our workplace. We'll give it a couple more moments. Once the numbers stop ticking, then maybe we can move on to the second question. So numerous HSE initiatives have been implemented due to COVID-19. I think we'll all agree that there have been changes in our organizations. So the question is, do you think your organization will return to the same practices after the pandemic is over, or will they not? Or do you think there's somewhere in between where it will be a combination of both? You know, we heard from our panelists the fact that, you know, remote audits are being carried out now. Do you think that will continue? Interesting to note that nobody thinks that we'll go back to the old way of doing business. So there clearly has been an impact on our industry, and we've figured out how to manage it, and we will probably continue down similar practices going forward. All right, thank you everyone for the contribution and for answering those questions. Just to remind everyone again that we do have the question and answer chat on the box, so please type in your questions to all the panelists, and then we will try and get through all those questions. What I would like to do is I've got a few questions of my own up my sleeve, and we'll start with those, and then we'll start doing the question and answer session. Maybe Samantha, maybe first up with you. You spoke about the nudge theory. Maybe you can expand on that a bit more and tell us how you've applied it within HSE.
Yeah, great question. And obviously, you can see from the experts and also the literature that one nudge or two nudge isn't enough. and that's what we've learned over the pandemic. And we see our environments changing, our technology changing. But with nudge theory, it's this repetition that actually leads to a behavior, for example. So you can't just have your environmental nudges of your hand sanitizers within your environment, or your physical distancing nudges in your environment as well. It also has to be a repeat, so that you're almost immersed with this information and awareness. And through that repetition leads to behavior. And that's why with nudge theory, it's not just about environmental nudges, it needs to also be technology nudges. It needs to be within our workplaces and at home. And it's that repetition that leads us to a behavior. And we know from neuroscience, for example, that when you're learning a new behavior, or your neural activity is in what you call your prefrontal cortex, or the front part of your brain, and that really is where you become focused, and then obviously once you've learned that behavior sits back in a different part of your brain, in the basal ganglia, where it then becomes a habit. And I think that's what we're learning more and more and more, is that we need to have that repetition in order to nudge to actually shift into what we call a learned behavior. And I think it's been critical, and we see it in our workplace, and we see it at home even. So it is very, very important. And that's why I had the opportunity to work on this specific case study, the C19 nudge, that leverages that human-machine interface, so that you're nudged throughout your whole day until you sleep, right? So that's a great opportunity to really use the nudge theory, but with biofeedback loops that then feeds back as a behavior, and then obviously prompts throughout different times of your day. Hopefully that gave you some insight into nudge theory and how we've applied it with some of our technology we're building here at the eFactory. Oh, and we're also working on, Hafid, just the sample of our smart mask and gloves you talked about, and I think Paul mentioned it. Contactless connectivity, to be able to use RFID tagging, so that we don't actually have to touch surfaces. So that's another what we're working on now with our smart mask and smart glove, hopefully for the event in November, maybe. Over to you, Hafid. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Very interesting. I think we'll be exploring a bit more of that over the next few minutes. Shinzia, you mentioned this making it personal, telling stories. Maybe you could share with us, without revealing who, one of the E&I We've Never Stopped stories, and how you've used that within your interactions.
Yes, thanks a lot for this opportunity. Okay, I was touched, of course, by several stories, but there's one story that gave me a different perspective, because Now all the people know about the self-isolation and so on, but probably they never thought that when people are on board of platforms, especially in small platforms, we don't think about the big platform in North Sea, but in small platforms like we have in some places, people are used to be isolated, even if in a little group. And one story was about this life in this platform, and they consider the platform as a refuge. In fact, the platform is a refuge where you can feel safe from the sea, from the wind, from the weather. And this is similar to our house and our home, that during pandemic, it's a refuge where we can stay safe from a virus. So I thought that this similitude was interesting.
Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Paul, maybe we can touch base on maybe some of the novel approaches that you and HSE have looked at for operators to become more COVID secure.
Yeah, thanks, Phoebe. Kind of touched on it in the initial conversation, but as Samantha said, this no-touch is quite key to it, and making sure that we do maintain cleanliness wherever appropriate. It absolutely is vital. One of the biggest things that we see in terms of lapses is that people go to shake hands, they want to be with their friends, you know, they've got really good working relationships. You can imagine on an offshore installation, you take off the person on the opposite team, and you're pleased to see them after 3 weeks of being offshore, and you want to go and shake the hand, put your arm around them and say, how's things going? And we really need to get out of that mindset. So we need really good supervision. We need that social conscience. We need it to go away from being learned behavior to habitual behavior that is in the back of the brain. It is there all the time, and we do it by habit rather than the shaking hands by habit. We actually are cognizant that we can't do it anymore, and we have to keep our distance and maintain our cleanliness and the standards that we've set ourselves up to reduce the effects of COVID-19 as appropriately as possible. Using digital technology, as I've described, FLIR cameras, other types of cameras, to do screening, to do temperature checks, using facial recognition, using contact tracing to make sure that where people have had these contacts, either in a social circumstance or in a work circumstance, that we can isolate the people properly and prevent the spread and containment. And that has been really, really effective. We saw significantly at the beginning of the pandemic. We've tracked this all through to the current day. We had the kind of second wave, it did go up, but nowhere near as high. And we're back down to really less than handfuls of demobilization, for example, from offshore, of persons that have had any symptoms or have been in contact with others that have had symptoms. Thanks, Hafidi.
Thanks, Paul. I think maybe the panelists, we can all keep our videos on so that we don't have to keep them on and off, and we'll just play with the mute button. So I invite you to just turn your cameras back. You know, just listening to what's been said, you know, in the past, one of our biggest challenges around personal and process safety was the personal interaction. We wanted people to get into the field, to meet up, to carry out behavioral-based safety observations. We were encouraging face-to-face interactions, and we've now unfortunately had to take a step back with, you know, some of the comments that have been made around the need to social distance and to, you know, to pull back a little bit. So how can we use technology to reenact what we were doing before? I'll leave that up. I mean, the panelists. Yeah, Paul, you go first.
Yeah, thanks, Fidi. We have kind of been through this, and you do the virtual, you do the remote inspections. That gives you about 75 to 80% confidence in terms of what you see is what you get. But that final validation really does need to be on site. You can do the majority of it. Verification, however, and for process safety in particular, you can do that by maintaining social distancing, by maintaining good hygiene standards, by wearing appropriate PPE, and actually doing that work in a better way. You need to set it up, be prepared. You can do real-time monitoring with you know, videos and iPads or other smart devices, but you do need that absolute assurance in the end. Thank you.
Hafid, just to clarify the question here, are you asking more about how we can leverage more connectivity with technology? I think that's what he meant, because we're all, you know, tech. Are you tech fatigued? Was that what you meant in relation to how do we, because it was, you know, Paul mentioned about, you know, the operators on, you know, still feeling connected on platform, for example, and are you asking more about how do we leverage technology for connectivity and more social connectedness?
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues that we face, right? Because we can't end up just taking a distanced view to everything. How do we continue to touch people in their daily activities, just to validate that what they're doing is the right way of doing things?
Right, and I think you can definitely leverage technology in that way, but then there's that, you know, that balance, isn't it? Because we are getting very much, you know, another virtual conference or another virtual meeting, and it is very fatiguing. And you know, we see it physically. For example, you know, eye fatigue. You know, we're actually seeing that you're more exposed to lots of screen work, and then there's high megapixels, and you're having to, you know, overuse your visual acuity. And we're seeing ideas around, well, how could we potentially leverage practices like the 2020 rule, for example, like looking at least 20 meters away and reframing or refreshing your visual distances. But I think the idea of leveraging technology is what we have to step up to. And I think when we're in virtual meetings like this, for example, where we're making sure that there's that interaction, that we've used the Mentimeter, for example, to really engage our audience. And I think these are the type of tools that we need to leverage when we're having our team meetings. And I think it's critical. We really do need to be looking at how we enhance that social connectedness, leveraging technology so that we do feel that we're not alone in the workplace, and at the same time balancing that tech fatigue that we're seeing. And I think it needs to be addressed. And I think, you know, as in teams, you need to think about how you could have, you know, different tasks throughout the day opposed to just virtual meetings, for example. Hope that answered or explored perhaps some of the technology, and interface differently, you know, use different interfaces, whether it be your laptop, whether it be your iPad, or whether it be your phone. Make sure you have those different technology tools. And then obviously explore various ways you can use connecting in the virtual space, where you can make sure that those that you have, virtual rooms, for example. You can use virtual rooms where you can really deep dive and perhaps, have different indicators or characteristics with each of the virtual rooms. So I think definitely exploring those technology tools is critical. And as Paul mentioned, you can pick up through cameras and look at emotional intelligence through CCTV as well, where you can really modify or look at how that social connection, who's looking upset throughout the day, who's obviously it's mask compliance, but how can we also be gaining that data stream to make sure that those that are feeling isolated or not connected, that we're actually being predictive rather than it being reactive. And I think a lot of our technology tools can help identify those that are potentially at high risk through digital processing, through various different facial recognition features. Through your face, and even speaking, for example, you can tell through my voice when I'm happy or I'm sad, and I'll be smiling. But you can also use voice recognition technology and natural language processing to identify perhaps those that are struggling in the workplace. We need to leverage those technology tools to enhance that social connectedness as well. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Samantha. Yeah, it's probably, EI is listening in. There's probably a few work streams there for them to investigate as well, because this is a new world. I think we saw it in some of the answers to the earlier questions. We're not going to go back to what we were doing before. So we need to understand the impact of this change in the environment, the change in the way we're doing things, and provide the guidelines. I mean, Samantha, you brought up some of the basic stuff around just the screen usage and the fact that many of us are now sitting down, or I can see you standing, which is excellent, in in these meetings, and it's just one after the other now as well, right? What do we do to make sure that the well-being, the health and safety of the individuals are managed? Maybe, Chinzi, maybe you can help us answer one of the questions here that we've got. So, have you been surprised about how easy or difficult it's been to change staff behaviours and cultures as quickly as the pandemic required?
No, I wasn't surprised. And moreover, I think that the approach can be different also based on the age of people, because young people, they have a different approach with the technology. So in this case, the young people help a lot to change and to react very quickly, and to introduce a new way of working, and the approach of the use of technology during this pandemic.
Yeah, one of the challenges we've faced in our industry is how you do change management. Now, the pandemic has forced change on us very quickly. I guess one of the questions for the panel is, do you think the seriousness of the pandemic has enabled the change to happen more quickly than normally would happen in our industry?
Yes.
I see Paul shaking his head.
Yes, for sure.
Nodding, I should say, not shaking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all had our arrangements prior to the pandemic, which probably featured some form of pandemic in there, whether it be the flu or something like that. But COVID-19 has made the world a really level playing field in terms of how we've responded to it. It's been phenomenal. And I think people have adapted very, very well. And Sincere just described the younger generation found it much easier to adapt to the technology than the older generation, but they've actually caught up. I think it's made the workplace a different place. But I think there's some really good practices there, and the well-being aspects that you touched on are vitally important. We do need to cover all the bases cannot just accept that we're going to just keep doing video conferences. We need to put in extra measures to secure the well-being of our staff and colleagues outside of work activities, but in working time. So, you know, virtual coffee mornings, light-hearted stuff. Not everybody wants to participate in that, but we do need to make that effort. And as Samantha said, you can recognise that people are struggling, and we need these extramural types of activities and managers to recognise that their staff are struggling and to help them properly.
So I guess that brings up the point. We are doing an awful lot in the workplace. Samantha talked about some of the technology being applied, the no touch. Are we doing anything for staff to take back into their home life? Are we helping them at home manage the situation as well? I mean, maybe you could give some examples if we are.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're really seeing that in our workplace, and I think especially when we have, especially here in the Middle East, we have a huge risk in the sense we some have households that have first generation, second generation, third generation living in the same house. So we need to also think about how we can take those incredible, wonderful health and safety practices and protocols back into the home, and we're seeing that. And we're seeing that this information, you know, I get alerts, and I'm sure you probably do, on my phone that speaks to the family. And I think that's very critical, especially in the collective societies where we're often, you know, at home with a high risk, elderly parents, and so we need to think about how we are making those nudges, as I would say, back from the workplace, but ideally back at home. And I think, you know, there's no discrimination with COVID-19. It's you know, it's everywhere in the sense that we need to all take control, and obviously the learned protocols that we've had here in our workplaces really do factor in back at home, and we've been you know, looking at that specifically.
Yeah, thanks for that. Maybe for the panel, one of the questions we've got is, have you faced mental health challenges of remote working? Not you personally, but the workforce. And how have we addressed that? Maybe, Samantha, you're nodding. Do you want to share first, and then maybe we can go around?
Yeah, again, working from home, definitely, you know, there are challenges, and I think Jinzia mentioned about generations. Like, you know, COVID-19 has made us all digitally transform, and setting up a work from home office is very stressful if you don't have a great internet, for example, and remote workforces, which, you know, Paul's already mentioned. There's a lot of challenges in relation to, you know, the working from home aspect, and I think that definitely we can learn digital tools and technology, but also making sure that employees at home have the tools and the resources to set up their home office, for example, and have an enhanced, you know, internet bandwidth, for example. So I think these are the type of I think opportunities companies have, and to really enhance working from home as a better environment. I remember seeing a meme where it looked at, you know, digital transformation from a COO, but they've used the new C, which is COVID-19, has basically enabled us to all digitally transform. And we're seeing across generations that generational intelligence. We've had a call to action. We've all had to step up to digital transformation, both in our workplace, but also at home. And back to your social connection question before, I feel that this has been connecting us more with our children. So, for example, my son and my daughter, you know, in tweens, they've been teaching me some, new tools and techniques, and have helped me set up with my, work from home office. So I think there's a great opportunity to leverage across the generations. Hope that answered the question there.
Yeah, it's actually been real interesting, right, to see how all of us have also moved very quickly down the IT path to enable the remote working. It was forced on us, and we reacted much quicker than we would have probably normally. Personal experience here. We got our remote team set up done very, very quickly. Your comment around providing the right tools. We had to have people self-isolate for a while, maybe because they came back from travel, so they're sitting at home for 10 days. You want to make sure that's effective. We gave them the large screens, the mice, the keyboards, so that they can work better at home. So, one of the challenges for us will be to document all of this, to make sure that we have the guidelines in place for the future. And as you said, the children have taught us a lot. My daughter, her remote schooling, she had like the Starship Enterprise set up with the number of screens and devices she was using to get through the day. So definitely teaching us. When we talk about organizations going digital in HSE, Paul, what kind of challenges do you think organizations will face?
Yeah, it's a good question, Fee. What challenges do they face? They face that interaction challenge. It's not necessarily the digital aspects that they are struggling with. The bandwidths are much better, as you've already described. We've kind of provided across most of the nations the right kinds of IT kit, the larger screens. We've done one-to-one interviews with people to see what they've got and what they actually need and how we can help them. But as employers, then, is it Big Brother watching you? No, we've moved on. I think this has accelerated technology in terms of how businesses operate. And then in the workplace itself, where people can't work from home, where they have to be together, it's created new technology around how we move commodities around the world. Look how that's the logistics of transportation of the courier services and other aspects of getting all sorts of commodities around the country has significantly increased. So it has become a step change in how we do things.
Thanks for that. Going back to your nudge theory and the work that you're doing, Samantha, one of the questions we have here is, in terms of the requirement to be consistent and to have repeat nudges, obviously the long-term psychological impact on COVID-19 is unprecedented. But what do the studies tell us about these repetitive nudges? Are there any suggestions on how we can ensure teams stay safe but don't feel overwhelmed by the constant reminders, the constant nudges, or worse, they just ignore them over time? They get bored with the same message being repeated.
Yeah, a great question. And again, it goes back to what we talked about, that technology fatigue, that virtual meeting fatigue. And what we're studying right now is that, and again, this is new territory for us in the sense of we're looking at specific timestamps throughout a day. So, for example, we are still learning when a specific nudge should be placed across an 8-hour day. So, for example, you don't want to be bombarded with reminders the minute you walk into your office, for example, or out on a rig. You need to have nudges that are basically learned for you. So we're building, and again, going back to your really insightful, I think, takeaway to all this is guidelines. We're developing this as we go, and need to be documenting this. So we are documenting when and where behaviors are lacking throughout an entire day. So for example, mask compliance, making sure, you know, you're washing your hands, making sure you're not touching your face, because that's basically how it enters your body, into your system, right? And so these nudges, we're learning it, and we're using machine learning so that we continuously upload an AI engine so that we will learn over time when the nudges, we're still very early, when should the nudges occur for a specific time frame or time stamp throughout the day. And the overlay to the nudges is what we're drawing in from the app. So for example, capturing heart rates at a specific timestamp, body temperature at a specific timestamp, and then loading that into the nudge theory. So it's not just about receiving notifications and a haptic, like a vibration, to remind you to do certain things throughout the day. It's more than that, because as Paul mentioned, it's learned behavior that becomes what we call habits. We're still very early, and human-machine interfacing allows us to study this more in depth. And what we're seeing now is that we're seeing trend as we overlay the data. We're seeing some trends in relation to behaviors, but we're still early, still much to learn, and we're really, I think, starting to really see some advances. And, you know, I was thinking, as Paul was discussing, can you imagine like COVID-19 nudge paired with, facial recognition and also, NLP and voice recognition? I think that will be the future. If I was to look ahead, that is the future. That's where we're heading. But I totally understand that you don't want to be nudged all the time. That becomes very distracting, very annoying, right? But we do need to keep learning, and learning through data. Our AI engines are really, really critical right now.
That's some fascinating work there, because it's interesting, because we do need to be reminded. I think our personal safety history has shown that the message has to constantly be repeated. But what you're saying there is really, when do you repeat it and how often do you repeat it? And the technology will help us maybe make some better decisions around it. So that really is insightful. We're coming to the close. I've got a question here for Shinzia and then maybe Paul. Process safety management. Do you see any impact in the long run around process safety management and the fact that we have a reduced ability to, say, inspect equipment at the frequency and detail that it perhaps deserves?
To be honest, I can see a risk, because in process safety, the presence of people and also the skills are very important, and we need to verify and on long term the efficiency of the training online and the coaching online. So we can improve, of course, the technology and the methodology, but it's a point of attention.
Yeah, I agree with Cecilia there. The technology helps, but I go back to this 75%, 80% margin of security. I think you need that absolute verification that has to be done by being on site and performing the necessary tests, the visual inspections. The verification process is absolutely critical to process safety, compliance, and driving down the risk of any incidents. So yeah, completely agree, Sincere.
So do you think that as we get more people on site, that there's going to be a need for us to do a rapid reassessment of our process safety risks? I mean, are you talking about that within your companies or within the authority, that you're going to issue some guideline around this or advice?
So, for example, in the UK, we are currently running a campaign around process safety, which the operators across the industry, the trade associations, the regulators signed up to, and we'll be revisiting in March around process safety leadership and how we deal with it. Technology's definitely got a vital place in it, but we do need to get back to making sure that in COVID-19 times, where we've probably reduced operating expenditure, where we've probably reduced capital expenditure, deferred some maintenance costs to try and get some people out to do what they need to do. That brings risks and challenges. So yes, as soon as we can, we need to get back to where we were in terms of the assurance activities around process safety. We cannot afford for these low frequency but really high impact events to start creeping into play because of the effects of the pandemic. We need to be really on top of this.
Thanks for that, Paul. Got a question here. I'm not sure if you want to answer because it has some medical implications, but the vaccine is coming. We've seen announcements in various news organizations, and proud here in Bahrain to say that, you know, we've approved both the Sinopharm and the Pfizer for emergency use, and other nations in the Gulf are doing that as well. Are you talking at all about how you're going to incorporate these into your integrated HSE management systems or practices? Do you see that? Okay, rephrasing it then, since there's.
I'll pick it up. Yeah, I'll pick it up,
Okay.
So the 7 days or the 10 days, as the health and safety executive, we've got scientists in our laboratories in Buxton in Derbyshire, and we feed into the SAGE group, the scientific advisory group. And if they determine that that's the right approach, the science backs that up, then absolutely we will encompass that into the guidelines. The guidelines change on a week by week, month by month basis. So yeah, we will embrace what the scientists tell us. We're not scared doing things for the right reasons. Once we've got this database of information that every nation's collecting around what's happening, then we can put it into practice.
Thank you, Paul. And one last question on the nudge theory. Does the nudge theory tool combine with any psychological theories in order to change staff behaviors?
I think just to understand the question, you mean the learned behaviors and the behavior change cycle and model? Absolutely. And that's population health, right? Indeed, that also is one of our prompts or our data point to understand where in the behavior change cycle, whether is a certain population or a employee that might be in relapse, for example, or there may be a certain percentage of the population that's in pre-contemplation or contemplation. And obviously those that are in action using the behavior change model are obviously not going to be reminded less, but they're also going to receive different nudges, right? So absolutely. The nudge itself is more a branding or product name, as well as it being a theory. But I totally agree, and the research says the same, and the experts in the field also indicate that nudge by itself is not a sustainable behavior change approach. And so, yeah, we've had to layer a lot of the behavior change models into our data, and also for our profiles and how we're building them. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. To be honest with you, I would like to keep this discussion going on for another 90 minutes, but I've got to bring it to a close and hand back to Will. But I'd just like to thank all three of our panelists today, Dr. Samantha Horseman, Paul Bradley, and Chinzia Sangali, for the time, the effort, and the insight you've provided us today. Thoroughly enjoyed being part of this discussion. And back to you, Will.
Thanks, Hafiz. And yeah, thanks to all our panelists. I thought it was an absolutely fantastic and fascinating discussion. Summing up the main themes for me. I think firstly, we talked about the ability to be flexible and agile and quickly innovate new tools and technologies, obviously far more quickly than anyone might have expected. And some of the things we spoke about there, I mean, obviously the plethora of inventions from Samantha was fantastic, particularly the nudge tool. We also spoke about virtual on-site visits and remote deep cleanses and temperature checks. But then, secondly, finding a way to connect those tools and technologies with the humanity of the staff and to protect well-being, thinking about people's lives at home and at work, and particularly using some technical tools to do that, like the facial recognition software, and then finding ways to counter tech fatigue through using stories and virtual coffee mornings and facilitate connections between people. And I guess thirdly, thinking about how each person is different, and so those those interactions and those tools are going to need to be different depending on the person. And particularly thinking about, where we were talking about the nudge tool and how that tool uses machine learning to keep improving and learning about the people that it's nudging. But then also the difference in technology take up between younger and older staff, the benefit that some people can have from having a family at home and being able to better connect with those families through remote learning, and then maybe some that don't have families at home that are more at risk from being isolated, and finding ways to pick up on that. And I guess finally that it looks like further industry guidance in this area will be very valuable, and hopefully that's something that EI might be able to help with. So I think we've got one final poll asking for everyone else's takeaways from the session. Oh, we've already got some answers here, so I'll give a few more seconds. That's a very nice phrase to sum that up, technologically together. Yeah, and I think using those innovative solutions and learning from others is all a big part of that. So with that, I'll conclude the session. Just to remind everyone, there'll be a recording of this session which will be sent around, and there'll be a feedback form that pops up just after the session when you close the browser. So it'd be great if you could fill that in. With that, I'll thank everybody again and call the session to a close.